Welcome everyone to our podcast, Redefine Strength. I'm Mark.
And I'm Leanne.
And thank you for joining us for another chat about all things powerlifting, coaching,
and redefining strength one conversation at a time.
Okay, welcome to another episode of our podcast. And today we wanted to have a continuation, I guess, of a question that arose from our previous podcast, but obviously we were like, we can't delve into this. This is another tangent, but maybe for something for another podcast.
More tangents, yeah.
But it was in relation to, I guess, the evolution of strength training, the different programming systems, and where, I guess, how it's evolved to the point that it is now. And
this is going to be a very long podcast then.
We're delving into the history, which you know, it brings up our main question for today's podcast, which is why is it important for us to understand the history of strength training, the evolution of strength training, where it's come from, and how has it gotten to this point now? Why is it important?
Yeah, I think, again, we've had a number of conversations on the gym floor about this as well over the years. And I think from a strength coach's perspective, understanding the history of how things have evolved or where they've come from makes it easier to coach people, because you're not always going to get a complete novice or a complete beginner. Sometimes you're going to get someone that's coming in from a different system. Who has followed a different approach, and having knowledge of those approaches becomes very, very useful because they've learnt a different language that they're using for their programming. So you might say something one way, but they've heard it a different way. Now, from the athlete's perspective, they're not, this goes into a different one, but they're not really students of the sport. Some are, but a lot of the time they might just come in and they've learnt one set of terminologies and that's their Bible. That's what they understand about training.
That's their reference system.
Yeah, their reference system or whatnot. This is what they know. So if all of a sudden you come in and say, okay, we're going to do something else, they're sort of confusing. It's like, oh, what's that? And then you've got to, explain to them what it is. And eventually that's like, oh, yeah, okay, that sort of makes sense. But if you've already got, if they're like, hey, yeah, I've done this, you've had a look at their programming, they've come from a different system, having that conversation around that system and looking at some of the similarities and differences can help get them, maybe incorporating a few things can help them get them on the path to making, to having some solid training and having some better buy-in to your process as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong though, like just because something or some process is called a different terminology or has a different word or language to it, doesn't necessarily mean it's something completely separate.
No, so I think that's where understanding the history of things becomes really important from a coaching standpoint, because you look at a lot of different systems and you look at the language used in different systems. You can look at the confusion of the language across if you really want to get into it, you can track things back, thousands of years if you go nuts. Like if you're talking about, origins of periodization, like you can go back 2,000 years, but we won't do that.
Well, no, let us go back, but obviously not 2,000 years, but
once upon a time.
Let's go back to sort of, I guess not the origins of strength training to the.
No, it's more the modern, I suppose the more modern approaches and how that language, I think, has changed and evolved. And I think to your question, like why is it important to understand that? But then it's like things evolve naturally as well. There's also an understanding of just because something was said 70 or 100 years ago, it needs to be the same thing now.
It evolved for a reason because we've learnt.
There's certain terminologies that I think are very important and form the overall structure of what we're doing. And that's where I think having that conversation around language evolution and in some cases confusion, and then we can be looking at it like from a powerlifting context. We're quite niche, and I keep saying this, powerlifting is still very small, and any of the top level powerlifting coaches in the world, like if you go to any top strength coach who's, head of certain sporting clubs, really top-known sporting clubs around the world, and mention any top powerlifting coaches' names, they probably have no idea who you're talking about. So I think sometimes we get very insular in terms of, or we think people or think things are bigger than they are, or terms are bigger than they are. So really we're just big fishes in a little pond. And it's about, I think, the evolution of, if we're talking powerlifting, comes from education and people learning, different systems and evolving their approach over time. And I think that taking a more scientific approach and having coaches learn some of the histories and some of the call it the harder sciences, gives you an appreciation of how different methods work, and the important thing, it's the underlying principles of why those methods work. And I think that's the core thing, because I could say, oh well, the principle of overload, and everyone will roll their eyes and go, oh yeah, you're just adding more to the bar, or you're doing this. But there's a difference between knowing what overload is and actually understanding how to apply it. You can understand the theory of what it is, and you're like, oh yeah, you just do this, but show me it in application, not just on a page. Like, give me an example of sometimes where you've run into a roadblock and you've had to apply that principle, but in a different way, using a different method, not just adding more to the bar. How are you overloading? And like I said, understanding different systems and how they apply that principle gives you more tools and gives you a better appreciation of what you can do in a situation, rather than just go back to the drawing board and this is the system I follow.
Refresh again and just repeat the same
exactly.
thing over and over again.
It's your externals. Just do that. Blame the athlete. So I think, having an appreciation for it, and I think as well, I said that it's another subtopic, but having athletes become students of the sport as well, teaching them as well, because they're no doubt going to be on social media. And they're going to see, everyone as an athlete's going to look at different things on social media because they want the inside edge. They want the secret technique. They want the secret program. And to be honest, they like getting strong. They like the fact they're getting strong. They're interested in the sport. They're interested in getting strong. They're essentially becoming students of the sport a little bit. So rather than, a lot of the times there's a lot of rubbish on social media, but sometimes it's good to have conversations about things that they've seen. It's like, well, they may be coming at it from this point, or
where did that sort of frame of thinking or programming style come from?
Or this is
the language that they've used in their post about what they're doing. Where did that come from?
Yeah, or don't pay attention to it. It's just Joel Seedsman with his isometric eccentrics. Don't go past 90 degrees. That's rubbish. Yeah. So you can have that conversation too.
Yeah. But, linking back to, the evolution of, language and programming styles over the years, it's all linked back to strength and conditioning. What are some examples of this?
There's probably two that I talk about that come to mind in terms of how language has changed over time, or and then not necessarily become misconstrued. And some people think, why does it matter? But I think still understanding it is important. And one I'll say is, if I mention the conjugate method to any powerlifter, straight away it's West Side Barbell. In my mind, it's not. It's if someone mentions conjugate, it's a conjugate sequence system, which was created by Yuri Verkhoshansky, father of plyometrics. So I think. And
what is the conjugate?
So the conjugate, as in, we can delve into it, but in its essence, it was actually a very early block, like people talk about block periodization. So you've got blocks of, now it might be hypertrophy, strength, or peaking. If you follow Vladimir Issarin's work in the 70s and 80s, I think it was accumulation, transmutation, and then realization. And before that, if you looked at Verkhoshansky's work, it was two blocks linked together, where it was one block of a really, what he called a concentrated load. So think a block of a lot of really hard work. And then
like
a block.
High intensity or like high volume?
High intensity, high volume, but a concentrated dose of hard training. So if we're looking at dosage, we're looking at volume and intensity.
It's high.
It's hard. Let's just say high volume, high intensity. Yeah, hard work. And then that's followed by a block where it's a little bit less, and then there's the concept of supercompensation, which you feel it in a deload. You get to the end of a block, and it's really, really hard. Then you let your body deload, and then all of a sudden you perform well. Whereas what he was doing was he'd give you a block of really, really hard work, and then a block of still hard work but drop the volume down, and then you'd peak. That's a very oversimplistic version of what he did. There was other things, like he had developed special exercises and things like that. And then integrated them into an overall model, which then formed the foundation of block periodization. So I think like Louis Simmons, when he was, he wasn't actually over there learning from him. He was translating text. So he was looking at a lot of Soviet texts, and he was looking at a lot of Verkhoshansky's work. And the thing that he liked about Verkhoshansky was the special exercises, that portion of what he was doing, like special developmental exercises. So
like what would you'd say like were more like accessory movements?
Yeah, so it wasn't in terms of powerlifting. Verkhoshansky wasn't a powerlifting coach, and this is the thing. He was a strength and conditioning coach. He helped athletes get stronger for their sport. So it's also remembering that. So
therefore, his movements were then targeted to their specific sport.
Yeah,
what do we need to do to get stronger in the movements that you would need to be strong in for that sport?
For anyone that's heard the term dynamic correspondence, he was probably the father of that term. If you've read super training, it's up there. If you've read super training, you would have come across the term dynamic correspondence, which is essentially looking at how exercises transfer over. So it's, I remember this is
like an example for like say a swimming or like a rugby.
Yeah, really. Okay, really dumb example for swimmers. Go and grab 2 dumbbells and pretend to do freestyle. That's just really dumb. Whereas something like a weighted chin up is probably a smarter idea if you're a swimmer.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to Louis Simmons, the conjugate method. He's read some of the text, so he's read a lot of Verkhoshansky's work. Now, Verkhoshansky created the conjugate sequence system, but Louis Simmons liked the special development exercises. He also looked at Zatskiowski's work, which anyone who's read Science and Practice of Strength Training will be familiar with: the maximal effort method, the dynamic method, and the repetition method. But if I was just to say that to a power lifter, if I was just to say, West Side Barbell, you go, oh yeah, max effort method, dynamic effort method, and repetition method. Probably some people don't say repetition, but just max effort and dynamic effort method. That was Zatskiowski. Now, Louis didn't steal that. He'd read the text and he incorporated into an overall program. But then he coined the term conjugate method. Now, conjugate meaning linking. Verkhoshansky, they were linking blocks together. So basically it was a block sort of method.
But was Louis Simmons' conjugate method, was it linking blocks together?
No, so what he did is he got the max effort method, the dynamic effort method, and he was trying to do it all in the same week. So you'd have a max effort day, you'd have a dynamic effort day, and your accessories you'd be based off, you'd rotate those exercises. So he'd use some
but they'd be doing concurrently.
Yeah, you'd be doing it all the same, and then you'd rotate them across a number of weeks. So he'd be very big on rotating out the max effort, rotating your max effort days every couple of weeks, as well as your dynamic effort. So he took the concept of Verkhoshansky's special exercises. He took the concept of the max effort, the dynamic effort method, the repetition method, which was basically his accessories. He took those concepts and went, okay, we're going to put them into a program. So really, it's a concurrent program. So it's like, oh, well, why is that important? It's like, well, because if you say conjugate now, everyone thinks West Side, but it's not. No one understands where it comes from.
So over the years, over the decades now, the meaning of conjugate in its essence meaning has changed because of the influence of Louis Simmons.
Depending on where you are, yeah. If it's basically in Western culture, you'd say conjugate. You'd think conjugate method. It's max effort. First of all, max effort method. It's dynamic effort method. That's the thought that goes into your head. But it's like you're now looking at two different people and not understanding sort of where that sort of came from. So it's like, well, does it matter? Can terms evolve?
Well, from a language teaching perspective, just because you've used a word for something to label it as something else can misconstrue meaning at the end of the day.
Correct.
So in this lens, when you're talking about, well, in actual fact, even though Louis Simmons called it a conjugate method, the actual methodology of it was a concurrent system.
Yes.
Therefore, then when someone new to the sport coming in, they learn about conjugate method and then they end up misunderstanding.
Yeah, then they say, well, what's
conjugate?
Then they may be going through some strength. Maybe they're doing their undergrad in strength and conditioning, or they've been training powerlifting, doing their undergrad, and they've heard the term concurrent, but they've known that this is the conjugate method, and then it's confusing.
It's like, well, what's the difference?
And then maybe
conjugate and concurrent.
Yeah, well, the difference is concurrence, everything together, and in its essence, conjugate is linking blocks together. That's the meaning of the word conjugate is linking things together. So
from a language perspective,
yeah.
conjugate, also conjunctions, which
Yeah.
with and, because, words like that, they link sentences together. That makes sense. So from a,
Yeah, I'm not the first person to say this either. There was a great article written by Milan Jovanovic back in 2012 talking about this as well. But then I think also realizing that, people did say to Louis as well, hey, or academics were saying, hey, that's not right, it's this system. And he just doubled down and said, nah, conjugate, he just said, no, I am linking things, and I'm linking the exercises together. So he changed the very structure of the conjugate. But I think, like, if you think about it logically, why did he come up with the term conjugate? Because he was reading Soviet texts, he liked the special development exercises, and then he saw the word conjugate and conjugate sequence system, and I think maybe he just liked the word.
yeah.
And it was just a historical accident as to why it got named that way. But it's like, once you've done something and you've made the error, you can't all of a sudden go, oh, no, I was wrong, I'm going to do that. It's like, no, it's conjugate. That's it.
But he's successfully coined the term conjugate method. It's gone down in history in the strength and conditioning and powerlifting spheres.
But to be fair, it's not like I'm getting as in bashing. It sounds like I am. But to be fair, like, I think one thing that he did, like, amazingly was introduce accommodating resistance. So we're looking at bands and chains, and not so much. I don't think, like, I think it's got some benefits for powerlifting. I think they're overstated. But in terms of strength and conditioning and using them in terms of sports, I think that it's a fantastic way to that you can train athletes as well. So using bands and chains, especially once you've developed a degree of strength with someone and you're trying to find more advanced ways without fatiguing them so much to get them to keep lasting through things as well. So I think that in terms of the legacy and why he's so big isn't just powerlifting. I think it's because he worked with a lot of other top-level strength and conditioning coaches, and they looked at the methods of accommodating resistance and went, we really need to, like, he was ahead of his time using
find
them.
ways to incorporate it to get their athletes stronger for their particular sport.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're going off the beaten track. I could go with examples of how that is useful, but the second example that I'd like to give. Well, do you have any questions about conjugate or anything? You think that was covered? The second example, which I find quite funny, is the term linear periodization. Well, there's different types or whatnot, but
linear periodization, in its essence, is what?
So the funny thing was, so in terms of academia, the term only became coined in 1994. There was a paper published by Baker in 1994.
That's actually quite recent.
Yeah. So the term was coined in 1994, which referred to the traditional model, or the Matveyev model of periodization. So the model is you start with higher volume, and then gradually, as you progress through a cycle, the volume will drop and the intensity will get higher. Mm-hmm. So that was established officially it was published in 1952, I believe, and it formed the basis of a different style. I think it was one of the most studied styles in Western culture as well. So if you look at it back then in the 50s and 60s, you've got Matveyev on one end, he's got this sort of airily called linear model, where you've got, I'll call it traditional model. You've got volume going down, intensity going up. And around the same time, you've got Verkhoshansky, who's going, no, we're having periods of concentrated loads with a block of less work. And then we put them together. So we're using more that.
Like more work, then less work, more work, less work.
And depending on which system you follow, benefits of that linear model, maybe it's a bit more beneficial to people who are a little bit more newer versus, those that need a bit more exposure or a bit more advanced, maybe favoured that sort of block style model as we go through. And there's some arguments for and against in super training. But I think that in 1994, the term linear periodization was just, okay, that's linear periodization, and that's the Matveyev model. People have said it's a real oversimplification of the term, because it's not just linear. There is lots of undulations all the way through. If you zoom out long enough for anything becomes linear if you're just looking at progress.
Yeah.
Like, you zoom out long enough, everything has sort of a linear trend. And if it doesn't, you're doing something wrong because you're getting weaker and weaker. But this is sort of looking at volume and intent.
Or stagnated.
Yeah, that's looking at progress, and then we're looking at a model of periodization. So why is, just because it seems a little bit more linear going down, it seems a little bit more linear going up. What it does highlight quite clearly, and again, this is like understanding principles, there is an inverse relationship between volume and intensity. If you give someone more intensity, you have to give them less volume. If you want to give them more intensity and high volume, there are ways of trying to do it, but you've got to do more sets, less reps, and take more time. So either way, you've got to spend then more time. But in its essence, if you're doing more intensity, there's a volume trade-off as well. You can't just keep pushing volume high and intensity high. So in its essence, the system's sort of looking at that. Now, where that term became even more misconstrued, so this is why it's interesting, because then if you speak to, say, some powerlifters, they'll look at not systems, because that's I suppose a model of periodization. They'll look at some programming, like a programming template, like a basic 5x5 template. We can go into the history of sort of how that's evolved, or like a starting strength.
I was going to say starting strength.
Starting strength, 5x5. We can look at others, but let's just focus on those two.
Yep.
5x5 starting strength. People have now started calling that a form of linear periodization. Oh, that's just linear. That's linear periodization. And it's like, whoa, where did that sort of start to come from?
So explain the starting strength or 5x5
Yeah,
and why.
So basically, it's linear.
Confusion.
It's linear progress, because the confusion was, remember what I said, the linear model. It was like, okay, it suits more beginners. Mm-hmm. Beginner athletes, not people that have never trained before. And then as you progress, block models were seen to be a little bit more popular and are a better way of training people as they got more advanced. So starting strength and 5x5, beginner templates. Progress is linear because you're adding 5 pounds a week, or you're adding an arbitrary amount of work each week, but the sets and reps each week stay the same. So I would look at that and go, yeah, it's just like a constant plateau. You've got the same sets, the same reps, and you're increasing weight each week. Fairly smart way to start training. Doesn't run forever.
And for a beginner, because for them,
Yeah,
they will respond to the stimulus because it's already additional stimulus.
And you're starting off on a, whatever system you like, but you're starting off with minimal dosage, but you're just increasing load and seeing where that stopping point is. Mm-hmm. Can they tolerate? And you'll see. And it's just it explains diminishing returns really well. But then in my mind, it's like we've gone from this traditional model that's been built up on, other decades of work, to then call it, it's just linear periodization in 1994 in terms of academia. So academia does things slower as well. But then, in terms of the last sort of, 10, 15 years, you look at the influx of social media, and it's like, it goes from, it's, starting strength, it's just linear periodization. It's like, what? Like, where's that come from?
So what would you call starting strength of 5x5?
It's a novice template in terms of the loading strategy. It's like a constant plateau. That's terminology I actually got from strength and conditioning coach years ago, Mladen Jovanovic, back in I was reading some of his charts back 12 years ago or something. He's becoming more popular now because like his way of thinking about things from a programming standpoint is very very helpful to strength coaches, I find, and because he's coming from it from a more of an applied perspective versus like a rigid sort of system or rigid sort of structure. Now, this is my issue as well, because some people then start, like, from the linear stuff, they're like, periodization's dead, it's just rigid. And then you start seeing that filtering into academia as well, which I disagree with. But I also like it because it's sort of still it's good to have an opposing view, and it's good to challenge something because it's not perfect. Mm-hmm. But it's better to have a system where you understand the imperfections. So some of the stupidity that comes out is periodization's a rigid structure, it's just everything set in its ways. But that argument's a programming structure. It's like, the sets and reps are all set. That's not periodization, that's programming. So first of all, understanding the difference between programming and periodization, whereas the arguments against periodization, if you look at them in its essence, it's like, well, you're just talking about programming. Now, in periodization models, if we look at the Matveyev model, if we look at Verkhoshansky, if you look at Iserin's block model, you look at a lot of work, then like Mike Stone later on, and so on and so forth, all the way down, and different models going through. Never is it, you must do this and you must fulfill this. This is a rigid
weights, and that's it, and you stick to that, and you have to just do what they say. Within
the model of periodization, you can adjust the programming because that's called smart coaching. And it's almost like along the way we've lost the idea of that's just coaching. It's like I'll put to you in terms of teaching. It's like going into you're an assistant principal or you're a leading teacher, and you're designing units of work for the school, and you're not just the units of work, but you're designing.
No, it's just any teacher, really.
Yeah, so you're trying to educate the kids that you have, and you've got to call it a scaffold or call it a plan, an overarching plan. It's not the actual individual lessons to start with, although you can come down to that. We'll call that programming, but an overarching plan of, okay, this is the direction we want to head. We want to start here, and we want to get to here.
Well, no, that's where you get the curriculum.
Yeah, okay.
So
we'll
in
call...
teaching terms, if you want to have a direct correlation with teaching terms with what you were talking about,
Okay, we'll talk the curriculum.
is that you have the curriculum that dictates what you're learning.
So I'll put...
and then you put the plan in place with this, which is your unit of work. So in your terms...
So I'll put this question to you. Teaching's dead, just get rid of the curriculum and just react to how the students turn up on the day. There's a little bit of truth.
There'll be some teachers who would love that, but at the end of the day, then you go into the day going, okay, what are we doing today?
Yeah, so
we have no idea what we're doing today.
So in that case, like I actually agree with parts of that, because you still need parts of that, and you can argue any point. But at the end of the day, if you have this system of chaos, like you've got, because that's essentially, sometimes teaching can be a bit chaotic and training can be a bit chaotic because, externals, people come in, there's things happening in people's life. It's going to be chaotic. But trying to then not having a system or a structure in place and just trying to sort of deal with it as it comes, it's almost like, fighting chaos with chaos. It's like, well, how's that going to work?
So in terms of that, it's what we call a balance. It's a balancing act between the two. So you need the structure that gives you the plan going forward, and whether it is for a certain period of time before then you reevaluate. But within that plan, you have the ability to adapt or adjust as needed, depending on, a variety of different reasons, whether it is how you're feeling, what's happening in your life, how you're responding to things, etc. Because you can, always put out, a plan, right? But there's also no such thing as the perfect plan. Right?
No.
There's a well-informed plan.
Exactly. And that's what people misconstrue. But in nowhere do you go, no curriculum, guys. We're not going to have it because it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm. And this is where
there's no plan.
Backward planning.
Yeah.
So would you then say
bottom up approach?
That's what you call it. Whereas we call it backward planning.
Yeah. But I think a bottom up approach can be useful in an overall. So you've got to have a system in place. So the answer is like, bottom up training, top down training. They're both equally useful. You've just got to know when to apply it. It's like small picture, big picture. But that's the funny thing.
Or reverse engineering.
But that's the funny thing. It all comes under the topic. It all comes under the headlines of periodization. Now, in older text, it's not called bottom up and top down programming because there've been terms that have come through. But if you look at systems, there is elements of bottom up programming and there are elements of top down. Another example. The influx of RPE in powerlifting. Now Mike T's openly said, I'm a big fan of his work. I got his original book when it first came out. Is
that this one here?
Actually, it is. There you go.
There you go.
It's like 2007.
The reactive training manual.
There you go.
Sorry, I don't know. I just
anyway,
it was up there.
There you go. It's like we've planned that.
No, we didn't.
We did. There you do that. So he even says, like, mentioned Yuri Verkhoshansky before in his text, actually super training there. He talks about having a subjective method of like a 1 to 10 subjective method of athletes going, well, how hard was that set? Because like you can't just, go off percentages and expect that you're going to be here by the end. You've got to have a method of backing down. There's got to be some other method. Now we're, the influx of velocity as well and linking that to RPEs. And I think that's very, very useful. There's very useful tools to help drive performance.
I could also add in, what about velocity-based training?
That's what I said, velocity. So velocity linking it with RPEs, which, again, pros and cons of that too. But as long as you understand the flaws of what you're trying to do, so RPE, so velocity, you'd probably give it to someone who's fairly consistent with their lifts. Because if you're looking at something on a page and they haven't filmed something, or, you haven't seen how the movements looked, you can have something looking faster, but it could just be that they tipped over, like the squatting tipped over, completely balls it up, but they just move fast, really fast at the top. So the average velocity was much faster. That might happen with a beginner, but it's less likely to happen with someone more experienced. But you've got to be aware of some of those issues. You might have someone that doesn't know how to calibrate a velocity tracker, and they've set their minimum velocity to 0.3 or 0.35, but they're moving at 0.2, and it's giving them really irregular rep ranges, but they just don't know to go in and set their minimum velocity threshold lower, even being a seasoned lifter. It could be something like that. But yeah, anyway, we're going off the beaten track a bit, but
it's underlying it all. the way that I understand this is that it's pretty much about you need to understand the purpose of what that system is, training protocol, whatever it is that you're wanting to use to inform your training or to improve strength. But understand the purpose of it to then understand when and where it's relevant for a particular athlete.
And literally go out and maybe learn other systems as well, even if you disagree with them, especially if you disagree with them. Go out and find how they're working. Like, you might disagree with something, but it's getting results. And you're like, well, I don't agree with that. But you know what? I'm going to find out why. And you might never apply the principles, but you still, you will apply the principles because they're the principles. You might never apply the methods of that approach, but there might be one thing, maybe. But then you look at it and you have a greater appreciation. You're like, okay. So then rather than having this binary, that's crap, this is good, bottom up approach is the best, top down is rigid, top down is associated with periodization and this rigid structure, which it's not. It's just, that's what people say now, because they've got an ill-informed view of what it actually is. They don't understand the history of where things have come from. And yes, they can quote one study that says one little thing about it, and it's like, yep, that's one. Show me the research over the last 70 years and look at how it sort of evolved. You can cherry pick one bit of data. Another example in relation to periodization, why people say it's not important. One of the reasons could be that a lot of the studies are done with, we'll say semi-trained or fairly untrained participants. Even someone who's recreationally trained or a trained athlete. Like, you've seen people that we've trained that are trained athletes that have come in that all of a sudden, it's like, no, you're getting newbie gains because now we're following a structured approach. So someone who's recreationally trained or trained, it's like, yeah, I've trained for 3 years doing this, but I haven't really done much, but I go to the gym a couple of times a week and they do a couple of machines. In the literature, that's called trained, versus someone who, maybe doing some Olympic lifting, powerlifting, that's a trained participant. It's like, this person's, they've been smashing the gym for, however long.
But then I would also say then, talking about like, you might be trained in strength. Like, you've gone to the gym, you've followed like a program for a specific thing, but it hasn't been sort of like lift specific. It's been quite broad or varied.
So here's
that's also different too.
Here becomes the issue, because I can create a study that shows that periodization's rubbish.
How?
Easy. I'll have an approach that's just random, non-periodized, and I'll have an approach that's periodized. I'll equate the volume. So volume and intensity equated across two 12-week cycles. One's random, or more random, we'll call it, but not structured or not periodized. And we could compare different models of periodization as well. I could do a traditional model, I could do a block model, we could do more of an undulating model, and we could just do a random assortment of everything. Go with how you feel and hit what you hit. As long as you get through it all, just hit what you hit. It's just, call it flexible, whatever. They'll all probably get the same results, because novice training effect, everything works for 12 weeks or a year. So where it becomes an issue is after 2 or 3 years. But who's going to do a study to test something after 2 or 3 years? What elite level athlete is going to do that? Yeah, I'll put my body on the line for science, potentially stuff up my athletic career, and for the name of science. So it is very difficult. So you've got to understand.
There are people out there, there are athletes out there who do participate in study, and it's fantastic.
I'm just saying the majority.
Yeah.
If you
into
go back,
the sample size,
yeah.
you don't have a huge sample
and
size.
This is where understanding the language. What is a trained participant? You've got to read the methods and actually see if they state, well, what do they mean by trained? Okay, they're recreationally trained. They've been training with weights for 2 years, but they don't know what they've been doing. They've just been training with weights. It's like, well, how do you know? Oh, because they told me. It's like, all right, well, yeah, you can include them in. And that's like, it's understanding the limitations of the study as well, which are always stated at the end if you read them. So they actually say, well, yeah, we used untrained athletes here. Sometimes untrained participants are the best for certain studies, because, there's studies you might be looking at certain things where you don't really want a trained participant. But it would
also looking like, say, a baseline level of impact of certain strength training protocols or whatever it is.
Yeah. So in terms of, like I said, in terms of It's easy to bash periodization because it's how many elite level athletes are there in the world compared to how many people are there at that advanced level compared to the novice level? Most people are at that novice level. Why is the fitness industry full of rubbish and full of different methodologies? Because everyone's trying to create a new thing. We spoke about that last time, because everything works for the first year or so. And then when it stops working, you go off and do something else. Oh, this has stopped working. I'm going to do my bodybuilding arc. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, which is all good things. It's not that everyone should be striving to be elite either. It's like that's part of, staying fit and staying healthy. But we're talking about the term periodization in this specific context, and people are bashing it, saying, oh, it's dead, and looking at the language of things over time and how they change. And it's like, it's just interesting sitting back, thinking about things critically and going, well, why is that?
So would you say that even though there's, I guess, a negative hurrah, I'm not going to say overly a negative hurrah, but there are some people who, like you said, bash the term periodization, that the majority of people use periodization in their program.
There's a lot of top strength and conditioning coaches as well that have been written papers on it against it. And I think that's a great thing. Why shouldn't you have an opposing view? Because then that's what creates discussion, and that's what creates, but that's looking at it like at that academic level. And, some of these academics that are doing it are also really good coaches themselves as well, which makes it even better. So then have this discussion, and then, that's what we need. What we don't need is then people who don't understand the language that's being used and don't understand the history of things, reading a small little snippet and then just creating a post about,
why this is bad,
chucking it into ChatGPT on here's your carousel on this, and it's just like, shut the hell up, you don't know what you're talking about. And it seems like you do, but then they're the coaches doing it now, and then obviously you've got people then training under these coaches who think they're gods, and it's just like the blind leading the blind, and eventually we're becoming stupider and stupider and stupider, but we're speaking with more and more and more authority, which I suppose is like what I'm doing now, but it's like, well, how am I different?
Yes.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm right and you're wrong.
No, I think it's more linking it into what you were saying before about having those discussions, especially around encouraging opposing views and not just, restricting your thinking to one linear, or so I say linear now, one single thought or process as the superior one, and understanding and accepting, acknowledging that there are many different ways that you can do something, right? That there are pros and cons, and also sometimes at different points, whether it's in different points of your training career, lifting history, or whatever, you will, play around, need to use or incorporate different systems.
Well, it's like you'll have to. Like if you look at myself, I'm quite specific when people start, but as people progress, then you have to.
I thought you were going to refer to your own training and go, look at me and how I've evolved.
Yeah, I'm doing my experiment. Yeah.
What's your experiment?
I'm going to training residuals. That's what we were talking about last time. Training residuals.
Diminishing returns.
Training residuals. What's left after 6 months of no training? I've already done that. It was actually quite interesting. But yeah, okay. I had good training residuals, but that was only one test, so I've got to test it again.
Test it again. Okay, so how long are you going to stay off training to then test your training residuals afterwards?
We'll see. Yeah.
No.
It's my experiment.
What were you saying about what you use for your athletes, not for yourself?
I'll tend to be quite specific for most people, and I think that's, in terms of powerlifting, most people are going to need to squat, bench and dead, get the dosage right, and then over time lean into some more variations.
But you also linked into that.
But that's also a method.
Simple. Well, you talk about it in terms of goals theory that you mentioned in our previous podcast about staying like systems have to start simple before they can become more complex.
But you don't have to do that. Like if you're an online coach, predominantly online, like I've got a couple that I train online, but I'm still quite specific. Although Irma, with her injury, we've had to sort of build back in.
She broke her arm, by the way. That was her injury.
She's recovered really, really well. But obviously, we can't be specific with that. We have to sort of
have variations or adaptations to accommodate for
look at a bit of bilateral transfer.
Yes.
Yep. Anyway,
love a good bilateral transfer.
Yeah, it's the word of the month. Yeah. But also, Thomas up in Queensland, like. Again, I'm more specific with him because I believe in that. But I think that maybe the difference, I've said this before, if you're coaching someone online, maybe you'll lean into more variations earlier because you sometimes need to create that constraint. You can see what someone's doing. You're not there queuing like starting with someone for the first time. So that's where things like tempos and pauses might be more beneficial for an online coach. Whereas if you're there in face-to-face, you'll say, hey, I'll just slow this down, I'll do that, or that look good, or whatnot. But so you might lean into that, even though it's still an overly simple system, you've just got more variations. Where it becomes a bit silly is, let's say you're squatting twice a week and you're doing a set number of sets and reps a week, yeah? Mm-hmm. And then you go to your lifter, right, we need to work on your technique here. We've got to fix this, this, and this. And you go, well, the way we're going to fix this, we're going to add a third squat day, and rather than just squat normally twice a week, we're going to do this variation on Monday, we're going to do this variation on Wednesday, and then we'll just have one comp squat on, and we'll practice those high exposures on the Friday or whenever. But I want you to focus on this. And they go and run a block or two. They get stronger. Technical feedback is on point. Absolutely great. And that's a good thing. But realistically, I could look at that program and go, you've gone from squatting twice a week and you've added 25% more work or 30% more work with an extra day. I can look at the loads that you're hitting with whatever variations you're hitting and look at the volume you're hitting. You're just doing more work for a novice. And I'm talking to someone like 1 to 2 years experience.
Yeah.
They're squatting twice a week, but you gaslight them to say, oh, we're going to work on your technique. That's the easiest way to make it look like you're the one that has all the answers, when realistically, now it's not saying technique's not important, but I bet my bottom dollar I could get exactly the same result by saying, hey, we're going to squat 3 times a week now instead of 2. If it
and
looks like
no variation,
if it looks like they're handling it.
Squats.
Yeah, just additional squats. If I have someone face to face that can do that and still work their technique, and again, it's not to say that variations aren't important. It's just literally look at, well, what is actually the mechanism behind what's improving? Is it the fact that you've made this grand adjustment to your technique that you're now in such a superior biomechanical position after 2 years of training? It's like, wouldn't you have been in that position after the first, block?
Well, I would argue, though, that instead of focusing on different variations to optimize technique, by squatting, increasing the number of times that you're squatting, you're also exposing yourself to more repetitions and practice of that movement to then further refine your technique of that particular movement itself.
And I can put in, there's always arguments against. I can put in heaps of arguments. I could say, well, this person had tendinopathy, so that's why we added in some tempo work and we slowed down their eccentrics. Perfect example. Great programming. Mm-hmm. But that's not the example I gave. Mm-hmm. It's the example of, no, this person's fit and ready, and you've just gaslit them by saying that we're focusing on your technique and we're putting in all these changes to your technique, when realistically, it's just more work, and that's what's going to get them better. But you're not going to tell them that, because no one wants to go, okay, we'll just do a bit more work and you're going to get better. That's pretty boring. I'm not paying you for that. No, I want the secret. Oh, I want you to move this, do this, have all these variations so you get your program. Oh, that's individualized. Look at all those exercises I've got to do. Look at those variations. And the funny thing is, if the person has 20 or 30 other clients, and then you train in the same gym as them, and it's like, oh shit, this person also has that variation too, and it's a Wednesday. Holy shit! Sorry, I shouldn't swear.
Too late.
But yeah, that's where it becomes funny, and then there's that moment. It's like, oh yeah, wait, you're telling me you can't coach 80 people, or you can't coach 80 to 100 people individually? Oh, we're all on templates? Yes.
But you also said previously as well, at the novice or beginner level, everyone has to start with a template approach before you can then add variations or adaptations to that program to make it more complex.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'd say that most people, if they're starting out, go and get a face-to-face coach and be on a template program. It's probably more beneficial. Have a basic template, get a face-to-face coach, and make progress that way. You'll make so much more progress. And then once to be honest, it's like you probably have someone that shows you the technique, and once it's down pat, you're probably better off just following a basic template that strategically increases work over time, and you'll save your money, you'll get quite strong, and then once things start to plateau, that's when you hire a coach.
Yeah.
Hey, here's the program I followed, this is what I've done. Can we make these adjustments? But a lot of coaches now will just gaslight and say, oh, you need this. And, coaching is important if the goal is powerlifting. But if the goal is just to get strong, you probably, if we're looking at access, and we run a coaching service, but if we just look at access, most people you can teach them in a block or so how to get comfortable. A lot of people running 8-week courses, 12-week courses for beginners. They could probably do something like that. Just follow a template. And if they like the culture of the gym, do that. If it's, if the coaching then is beyond their means, because coaching is quite expensive.
Well, we talk about it, and also if you link it back to what we were talking about in terms of beginner, intermediate, and more advanced lifters, you're at the beginning level, that's where that face-to-face coaching is so important, to learn the basics of, the movement patterns, etc., and also to help them gain more confidence in what they're doing, and also more independence in what they're doing, so that they can enter a gym and start training and know exactly what they need to do. Independently, and not be so reliant on someone standing there the whole time. And I think that's where I see the key difference between, say, like a personal trainer and a coach, right? Where personal training is like, you've got like your one-on-one, like your butler. I'm not simplifying PTs to a butler, but like, PTs is that privileged one-on-one service, but there is a high dependency and reliance on that relationship right there. Coaching, on the other hand, yes, you develop that relationship, definitely, athlete-coach relationship, but then it becomes more of that educational sphere, and there's a trust that goes two ways.
What's the difference between a personal trainer and a strength coach?
You tell me.
Personal trainer is, you can't call yourself a personal trainer unless you've done a Cert 3 and 4 in fitness. Anyone can call themselves a strength coach. There's a difference.
There you go. So therefore, who is more qualified, a strength coach or a personal trainer?
Depends on their level of qualification. Strength coach with no qualifications, not qualified at all. So, but then this gets into another topic, but yeah.
So much tangents here.
Here's like, in terms of, we discussed this, but like, people, will say, oh, the government has to spend money on initiatives to get people into gyms and things like that.
Which they did, right, with Cert 3-4s and getting more personal trainers trained up.
Yeah, and I'll say all that did was personal trainers could only be afforded by people who could afford to pay personal trainers to get fit. And if you look at most people who are in the obese category or the most unfit, they're in areas where the
lower socioeconomic.
Yeah, they're lower socio, so they can't afford personal trainers. So that was just a stupid thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, years ago, we took advantage of that. We did our Cert 3 and 4. We were able to...
But you also at uni as well.
There's all of that as well. But what I'm saying is...
strength and conditioning degree.
Yeah, if you look at the influx of personal trainers, it's not just social media, but it's the influx of personal trainers since the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. That's why, because it was government funded for the reason of, hey, we need to get more fit and active. But look at the stats of how more obese we are. Did it help? How much money is being spent in the fitness industry, and our obesity and our health is still just as bad. So that's why I was saying, in terms of like, wouldn't a smarter initiative then be, hey, what if the government funded some of these programs, like strength training is really important, like some of the 8-week courses that are actually, give people tangible things to do. It's like, hey, they can fund that, they can learn to lift, and then they can go away and do it themselves, because that would target a large group of people.
You'll have a large number of other...
Yeah, and then those that want to... Those that have the means, that want to train and do that, that's like, you can stick around. But it's like, I can understand why, it's like things don't get funded. It's like, yeah, because everyone just takes advantage of things. But like, but then, I suppose it's a different argument. It's like, look at what's the money being spent on anyway? So we could have a massive debate.
You can talk about the NDIS, for example.
Yeah, we can have a debate about everything. But like, at the end of the day, like, having a program that you could have for 8 weeks, where people then learn how to do the movements and then go off and do it them, and be capable to do it themselves, and then all they've got to do is follow basic templates, because it's like, oh yeah, I could do these movements. Here's a template that I can progress over the rest of my life. Well,
what about this then? Instead of
how's that for a tangent?
Just funding a program, I know we're going on a huge tangent, but actually looking at, because focus on education. Obviously, the two of us coming from education background. What about just switching and going, well, why don't we actually look at how can we fund programs to be delivered in schools to develop physical literacy?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this in a post previously about physical literacy and what does that mean, improving the understanding of our body, and how to move and how to stay healthy and fit and strong.
I'm so biased. I'll just say anyone who's interested in that from the government, go down to Frank Dando Sports Academy and have a look at how they run it. That's, they're literally getting kids that have been kicked out of mainstream school. 1/3 of the curriculum is geared towards sport and physical activity, not just sport. It's not just playing footy and cricket, it's physical activity.
So
A
it's
third-
like actually they've got a gym at the school.
Yeah, so the third of the curriculum for physical activity, swimming, boxing, judo, doing strength and conditioning, different aerobic exercises as well.
But then
Camps
they
4
also,
times a
yeah, I
year.
was going to say camps.
Camps 4 times a year, and we only teach maths and English. So we're not, and they never sacrifice physical activity for academia. And the progress that you get with these boys in terms of their academics is through the roof. Never seen it anywhere before. Why? Because they're all feeling better about themselves. They come into the school, they feel crap because, they're lacking self-confidence. What better way of increasing self-confidence than getting them feeling physically better about themselves? How much more likely are they going to buy into an academic program?
Yeah.
Doing that. That's literally the crux of it.
It's that whole
Like schools doing all of these, having kids sit in the classroom for 2-3 hours, and then you're just like, what's the point?
Well, no, it links back into the mind and the body connection, right? So when you feel good, right, then you will think better.
Yeah.
You'll move better, you'll think better, you'll learn more when you actually feel good with yourself, whether it's mentally and also physically.
Yeah. No. So basically, get some of these pencil-pushing potatoes to put some sport in schools.
We do have active sports as a Victorian government initiative.
I'm
but
biased.
that's
That's crap. That's absolute rubbish. The sport in government schools is rubbish. What? They're not even. I mean, the Monaghetti report came out in the 90s and said how much physical activity kids needed, and it never got done. It was literally, you need to be physically active and do this. It's like,
there's a guy that I follow, and I know that you follow too. He's a sports pediatrician. What's his name on Instagram? He's a
Feigenbaum.
Yes, and he puts out really, really good
Fantastic.
content about the benefits or the importance, I would say, of youth sport and physical activity.
Yeah.
And whether it's debunking myths, I mean, the most common one for lifting is stunting growth, which that's been debunked years ago, and yet
This gets back into language. It gets back into language and not understanding things and things that have been taken misconstrued. Another really good one was from research in the 70s. Don't put your knees over your toes when you squat. It was either the 70s or the 80s, and it was another 5 years it got disproven, and it's been disproven in every study. Well, pretty much every reputable study since. But everyone still goes back to that, don't put your knees over the toes, because there's research done in the 70s that said, don't do that. And it was disproven. But it's like, how are people still doing that? But I think it's fear.
That's what I was going to say. It's that fear-mongering language, and that sticks.
Yeah.
That sticks in people's minds.
Don't lift weights.
Over years.
Don't lift weights, you'll get injured. Don't lift weights, you'll stunt your growth. So parents go,
That's
okay, I'll make sure I
dangerous.
won't do that.
Yeah. But then if you actually look at, and the studies that go that are out there now in terms of injury rates in different sports, and you look at the rate of injury in lifting versus, say, footy, or more contact sports, the risk of injury is greater in contact sports than it is for lifting. And the majority of injuries that do happen when you're at the gym or lifting weights isn't necessarily when you're lifting weights. It's moving around the gym.
It's a stupidity. It's like,
it's
just
like lack of body awareness when you're moving around.
And the
But then the rare injuries that do happen when you are lifting, say, for example, bench pressing, right? And you don't have spotting arms. Once again, that's linked into stupidity, because you're not actually looking at how can I do this in a safe way using your spotting arms.
That's another pet peeve.
Arms.
Any power lifter out there that is not using spotting arms when they bench press, you deserve to get hurt. Like if you crush your face or you do something stupid and you haven't set your spotting arms, like you're an idiot. And don't post up about it because other people follow you. Absolute morons. Anyone who does that is a moron.
But those posts get glorified.
Exactly.
Or they become viral videos.
Niche sport, big fish in a little pond. Powerlifting's tiny. But
the issue that I have with that, though, is that then you get, people who are new to the sport or they're new to lifting or they're coming to the gym and go, I want to learn how to lift properly. I've never done it before. But they've seen these reels on Instagram or social media, and it just creates that fear around that lift, and they associate that fear with lifting is dangerous, lifting is bad, I will get hurt from lifting. And I get that. I actually just got that question asked last week about benching and how is it dangerous, and straight away I went, that was my pet peeve, like spotting arms. And that's a rule that we have at our gym. You have to use spotting arms when you're benching.
A spotting arm is more safe than a spotter. If you have spotting arms set at the correct height, it is more safe than a spotter, because a spotter can miss miss something, things can just fall out, things can happen.
Human error.
You can rack the weight hard and it can bounce out, and if you've got the spotting arm set, spotters aren't just going to all of a sudden quickly grab that.
It's you're relying on human reaction time versus something that is there, stagnant, and will catch it every single time.
It's just anyway.
Yeah.
But sorry, getting back to the kids, for parents, everyone wants the little holy grail or the secret sauce. Here's the secret sauce. Start your kids' strength training before they hit puberty, and it gives them, they'll be stronger later in life because they've started there. There is some good research out there to suggest that having kids starting strength training before puberty gives them such a leg up later in life.
And in terms of even just like muscle mass and bone density and overall health markers.
Yeah, just being stronger.
Yeah.
The ability to get even stronger.
Yeah.
Just from doing that.
And we're finding more and more now that it's, say like my parents' generation, for example, they're starting to realize the benefits of strength training, but they're at that point in their life going, how did I not know about this earlier?
But I suppose
why didn't I do this earlier?
We gave examples of history. I'm trying to sort of come back around, but it's like we've literally gone off on a tangent.
But it is linked into history, though.
It is.
Because for them, when they were, say, our age, they didn't have this understanding. It wasn't as common knowledge as it is now, the evolution of understanding of the benefits of strength training, not just language, but the understanding has improved and evolved over time.
Yeah. And that's, I suppose, the pros and cons of, I mean, in some cases, that's the pros of social media. People who are older, they get onto social media, they follow different pages showing them the benefits of strength training. So they're like, oh, maybe there's something to this, because there's a lot of people, and then their algorithm changes, and it's like, this is, there's more of that coming out.
My mum's algorithm now is all about bone density and sarcopenia. So it's all osteoporosis and sarcopenia now.
Yeah.
And so she was saying how she recently just had a hip surgery.
Yeah.
So just, and she's all her podcasts are about bone health.
Yeah.
Which is great, because now, like when I first started lifting nearly 10 years ago, her slogan, or what she was saying to me, was be careful. Don't lift too much, you'll injure yourself.
Yeah.
Now it's shifted so significantly to the point where she's going around and actively promoting strength training because she has seen it herself personally.
You don't go up to your daughter and say, you're about to play a game of netball, just be careful of your knees. Or, you go up to your kid and you're about to play some soccer or some footy, just be careful of your knees, just be careful. Like any sport, you go on swimming, just be careful, just in case you drown, be careful before your swimming race. Like, water's a hazard. Water's a bigger hazard.
Inserting that fear there.
Surf lifesaving, just be careful.
No, well, it reminds me of just that typical.
But no weights.
What example when you're learning to ride a bike, right? And what do you say to a kid? You don't tell them, oh, look out, don't hit the tree, or look out for the tree, because the first thing they're going to do is straight to the tree.
Careful of your back, careful. Imagine squatting, careful, back straight. That's literally like, what are you going to be thinking about? Like, oh, my back. Like, come on, like, Yeah.
No, but this shift in terms of my mom is more about, she's now learnt more. She's actually, like I said, over the years, we've become, I guess, more educated, or we've because there's more research now evolving in the space as well. We're learning more about the benefits, and it's more readily available thanks to social media, I would say, in addition to, there's more and more research in that space.
Yeah.
And strength and conditioning is growing slowly.
Yeah. So I think, to hit the nail on the head, it is important to, big tangent, it is important to acknowledge, and for coaches to be students of the sport and understand the history of where things have come from, and not be so dogmatic in your views, which is funny because that's the argument against periodization. It's dogmatic, yet you're being dogmatic in your approach by not
acknowledging.
You are acknowledging, you're just going, oh, that's crap because that's old, but not acknowledging where things have actually come from and why things have evolved a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's almost like looking out for pitfalls as well, and go, well, is being super, reactive all the time, like coaching all the time, is that, like, if that's all you're doing, is that a really good thing? Or is, in some cases, hey, we need to sit back and have a look at the bigger picture. But I mean, it's like a pendulum. Everyone's now talking about zooming out and looking at the bigger picture now. It's like, but whereas,
was it
8 years ago, it was like, oh, no, you've got to look at the minutiae. So it's just the
mesocycles, the microcycles,
in 5 years, golden microcycle. In years' time, it'll be, we'll be back to the, optimizing the the session by session, and then we'll be back at, oh, look at the big picture again. It'll go in ebbs and flows, I think. So
but really underlying it, I think the main thing is like you need to actually be able to see all of it and how it all connects together. You need to see how the big picture then impacts the minute smaller picture, and then vice versa.
Understanding how the principles work, I think, is very important. That's why studying different methods gives you a greater appreciation for that. Everyone knows principles of training, but very few can actually apply them or understand why they work. They can just, as I said to start with, they understand the theory and they can sound confident saying that, but then it's very difficult. It's like, how would you apply that? And, people could use case studies and say, well, I've done this and I've done that. But, that's good if it's a discussion you're having, or is it just a case study you've created because something's worked, and then you create, like, everyone's wise after the event. So it's like, so-and-so's got heaps of case studies on how things worked. It's like, show me the case studies on things that didn't work. I'm probably more interested in those. What have you tried?
That's probably more interesting, because then you can go, why isn't it working?
Yeah, why?
And
what
can we improve or change?
Yeah, what have you tried, and why did it not work?
Yeah,
like, I've done this. Like, it's like, yeah. So, and again, everything's always put up in a positive light. So, understanding principles, and it helps guide coaching decisions down the track, and also preventing pitfalls, like, just falling for rubbish. Like, you see some new thing come out, it's like, there's this thing that could potentially work, and it's just like treating it with we'll call it a healthy dose of skepticism.
Well, having a critical lens to things, so not just taking things at face value, right? But actually going, okay, now that you've got a better understanding of how systems work and why they work and where they've come from, then you're able to apply that critical lens onto language that is constantly evolving or emerging, coming out.
So basically, don't be lazy with AI. Use it as a tool to help your critical lens. Use it as a tool to help you think critically about things, because it is a lovely tool. But it can be very lazily used. And I'll just, I'll create shit, which is probably, it's what everyone's doing now. But
using it to create the content for you, and not actually going, okay, no, this is what.
Yeah, as in understanding it. You can use it as you can use it as a tool. Like I use it as a tool if I'm trying to sort of decipher different things. But then it's understanding, different principles and looking, like, organizing something in a way that's a bit easier to sort of see for how you're trying to see it. And the telltale is you have a conversation with someone, and then you find out pretty quickly what they know and what they don't know. Yeah. Because if they don't have their little chat GPT or their AI bot there telling them their information, it's pretty easy. Just, have a conversation.
Yep.
That's the best way. Have a conversation, ask them a few questions, and you'll soon find out who knows what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to end this conversation now.
Are we?
I'm looking at the time.
We're going to go off on another tangent.
What's the title
of this? What's the title of this one?
We're always going to go off on tangents. That's inevitable.
Okay, title of this one.
We're talking.
I was going to say, do we know what we know? That's going to be the title.
No, it's not.
It is. It's the title. That's what I'm doing.
No. Anyway, thank you so much. This is the end of our podcast.
Thank you. Yes, it is the end. Officially. If you've stayed with us this long.
I need to say this is the end, because otherwise they're going to keep talking and it will just go on forever. So we can always park it for another session, another episode.
Done. All right.
Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Redefine Strength.
Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all upcoming episodes.
Until next time.